I've been eating your light when my tears start to fall. I think of that wall that you built between us. I wanna turn it to dust. Tonight I drive you out of my mind. You and my devil now just out of sight. And my blood turned from red to black. I just wanna get you out of my head. Tonight I'm cold and black, black blotted. You can drag me to the ground. 'Cause I'm cold and black, black blotted. You can drag me to the ground.
Recently, I did some traveling, a trip to Vegas, and then I moved home across 5 states. I had a blast, but I ended up happy but very sleep deprived and massively distracted from doing work, like editing videos and building product funnels and that kind of thing. I love this kind of rapid change. It suits me and my Aquarius personality archetype down to the ground. But trying to get creative and do the high-level output in amongst the transition is super tough, especially when you don't have access to your regular setup or your gear or your regular routine. As a result, I found myself returning to disciplines and habits to find my groove, and I thought it would be really useful to talk about this. Because the first thing that I recognized was that after a trip or a transition or, anything that takes you out of your normal flow, you need to give yourself time just to adjust to your new workspace or just get your workspace set up, but also time to get your head back in the game. And that's the important part that I want to kind of talk about today. So some of this works on a practical level, but some of it really applies to the psychology too. And I realized that getting your head back into the creative game or into like high-level creative output after a major transition is very similar to getting yourself out of a creative rut. So I thought that this would be a really useful protocol video to save and to watch and to use regularly, whether you're in a creative rut or whether you just want to increase your productivity in your creative stuff anyway. I found myself really falling back on habits that I'd already established. So the time to establish those habits is really when you're in amongst your normal day-to-day life, so that when a rut appears or when a transition happens or when you travel, it's very easy to kind of lean on those habits and disciplines. So the first thing that I prioritized was sleep and walking. So if you're not getting enough sleep or exercise, I would say don't even try to do anything. Don't make any major decisions. Prioritize getting to a place where you're rested, and you will save yourself all kinds of mistakes and misdirections and wrong turns just getting this squared away. And this really does mean, go to bed early and make sure that you wake up at the same time every day. Try and make it as early as possible if you can. Like those early hours, like I would always call myself a night owl, and there may be something to that. The neuroscience seems to be split just from stuff that I've read. But despite characterizing myself as a night owl, I still get way more done. I can get like a day's work done in just like a very small section of the morning, like a few hours. So I try to capitalize on that. Maybe you're different. I would say with any of these things, try them, apply them, see how it works for you, and go for there. Okay, so I'd say go to bed early, make sure you walk every day, and just try not to eat junk food. I think the impact that toxins and stuff in junk food, even like just the sugar and carbs and so on in the junk food, they suppress our higher functioning, and they make us tired and lethargic, and you're just a fraction of the person that you can be when you're not eating it, and as well as the other wealth of health implications that go on. And it's really easy when you're traveling to rely on junk food, and sometimes you just have to. But if you can curtail that as much as you can and just try and be as disciplined as possible, it really does pay dividends in the end. So, like eat as clean as you can. Make sure that you walk every day, even if you're not fit, even if you're not a walker, even if you have injuries or whatever. Like, do what you can, whatever suits your body. But just that process of setting in a discipline and going for a walk every day, getting out in the fresh air, getting some sunlight on your skin in like a non-hellish way. Like if you're in Texas, like make sure you slather up with sun cream or cover up or whatever you need to do. But that process is massively helpful in terms of resetting your circadian rhythms, in terms of getting you to the point where you have this healthy, block of time where you can focus on whatever you need to focus on. It's phenomenally restorative. So sleep, walking, and cutting out the junk food is an amazing way to get yourself back on track and just to get your clarity back. Another way that these very basic routines help me is in setting up a routine. So when I can do something on the regular to it's kind of like the habit stacking that's become popular. You roll right into the next thing. So you do your walk and maybe you shower afterwards and maybe you eat or maybe you caffeinate or whatever it is. You've got a little routine going. And one of the problems I think that people experience with work from home culture now is not having the routine and the structure that they used to have when they used to go to work. Obviously, I haven't had that for a very long time, but I've noticed that having some structure to my day really does help me to focus for the short blocks of time that I need to focus for. So the next thing to consider is that after a transition or after a vacation or after, changing projects or going through a creative rut, who you are and what's important to you can change. It can change dramatically. And so the first thing to do before you start like just trying to churn out whatever it was that you were churning out before is to check in and make sure like is what you're wanting to do, are your goals in alignment with who you are now? And that might not always be the case. And it might mean that you have to change direction or project or job or whatever it is that you're doing. And sometimes this is a scary prospect, but it's worth really thinking about and making sure that you and every part of you, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, are in alignment with the task at hand. Otherwise, you're going to suffer from symptoms like continuing to feel scattered or to feel like you're in a rut or to not really have the energy to want to plow into whatever it is that's in front of you. So just do a check to make sure that you are on track. And if you're not, it's really worth doing some journaling and rethinking about what your big picture is. What is the big goal, the big undertaking that you can align with, that you want to work towards? And sometimes you can align the things that you've been working on with that new vision. And sometimes it's like a half-assed effort until you can transition into what your bigger picture is. But just getting clear on where you want to go is essential before you even sit down and write the next sentence or send that next email. I think it's really the thing that you ought to spend more time getting clarity on before you dive into just doing stuff for the sake of doing stuff. Now, I mentioned journaling, and journaling and writing is super important for being able to think. I remember back when I was studying psychology, one of the most interesting things that I read about was how language is important to how we think. And if we don't have language for something, we really can't think about it in any kind of sophisticated terms. We have these vague notions. So the more language you can put around something, the better. And I love that quote I can't remember who said it, but writing is about thinking. And you need to write in order to think. And I think that's super helpful to remember when you're thinking, oh, well, writing takes a lot of energy and focus. Yes, it does. And at the same time, the benefits that you get from formulating ideas on the page even though it takes time, effort, and focus, and those vital kind of capsules of energy that you get during the day, even though it takes all of those things, it's still worth doing. Because without clarity, it's very difficult to move forward with purpose and to move forward on something that's important. So, journaling and just writing on a topic that you're interested in or that you're working on, they're both really important tools. I like the idea of journaling first thing in the morning. I'm a big fan of Julia Cameron's The Artist's Way and the process of morning pages. And at the same time, sometimes once I'm in my flow, I find it better to do that later. I know that that's the wrong thing to do in terms of the morning pages thing. I just find that my brainwave frequencies, I think, are operating at a slower pace so that I can connect energetically more to vibrationally more to what I want to be putting down onto the page, or what I want to be kind of what I want to have coming through, and pulling down into the tangible thing of language and thought and the words on the page. So when I've been in this transition and trying to get my head back in the game, I've been doing it first thing in the morning. Get up, get my decaf coffee, and then get that done, and the information flowing through me first thing, rather than waking up and doing other kind of so-called productive stuff and then doing the journaling later. Later on, I think once I'm back fully in flow, I'll probably save the journaling for quiet time again, which was what I was doing previously. And but in any case, I think I'm sharing this so that you can think about what might work for you and your situation. If you're stuck, I would really recommend getting stuff down on the page first thing in the morning. Just going through this latest iteration of the process, I really do appreciate a lot more how magical it is in terms of ideas flowing and answers to questions that I haven't quite formulated, and how they just kind of flow onto the page in those first kind of moments in the morning. And so this brings us on to another concept of you know how do you manage your emotions and that kind of spiritual connection that is so essential to being able to do the practical stuff and find your direction and your big picture. And I'm a huge fan of a lot of techniques, affirmations, emotional releasing, which was something that I used to teach when I was coaching a lot, prayer and meditation. I know people have resistance to a lot of these things, all of these things, some of these things, but all of them are super useful. And I don't really know how you can be a fully formed creative person if you're not doing at least one of these things. So I would say dig into them. Each of them are on a video on their own, so I'll probably circle back and talk about these in greater detail. But wherever you are, whatever you have access to, use those practices in order to find the inspiration and the motivation and that connection with yourself, because ultimately that's what's going to drive your productivity. Another really kind of mundane but also super useful thing that I love to do when I'm stuck in a creative rut is to read books that are either spiritually enlightening and inspirational, or that they're about the craft. So, for instance, when I was writing the novels really fast, every now and again it would be really useful when I was like between books or editing perhaps. I would like to read the craft books about writing, because it would give me extra ideas that I could then, that I, even as I was reading them, I was having ideas for the next book or the next series. And so I found reading, whether on audio or on the page, it's really helpful for getting out of a creative rut or getting my head back into the specific game that I want to be engaged in. In terms of like the more spiritual stuff and the higher level stuff, I love The Power of Now. That's a really great one. In fact, The Power of Now is one that I carry with me wherever I go, like even if I'm traveling, because it's so easy to just dip into. It's like you read a paragraph, you don't even get through the paragraph, and it kind of drops you into the state of absolute presence. So whenever you're in turmoil or in transition, or you're just feeling a little bit diffused and not sure which way's up, just getting present is so powerful and so helpful. And so I like to have that on tap. There are loads of inspirational books though on the market. You can just like type into Google or Amazon and find ones that resonate with you. And so having a read of whatever is useful to you can help kick you into the next kind of directional kind of productivity flow that you need to be in. Okay, now this last one I am not a huge fan of, but it's the butt in seat principle. Okay, here's my reason. I'm going to tell you why I hate it, and then I'm going to tell you why we should do it, and why it's kind of awesome as well. So I don't like the idea of having to force creativity at any time. I remember I was reading a book by one of the late night a comedic show writers, and he said that writing for the late shows, when you're having to like produce shows for 5 days a week, was like trying to take a shit after you've already had a shit. And I'm like, oh my god, that sounds like hell. Like even churning out, a novel a month, which was what I was doing, that was not quite like that, but it was hard. It was an endurance test rather than an exercise in creativity. And I'd rather like have this kind of overflowing of creative energy to spill out into whatever work I'm working on than to have to go digging for, stuff that obviously is a bunch of it's going to be crap, literally. Um, so, button seat speaks to me in a way of like, oh, you have to just sit there and force yourself to kind of give birth to something that's not ready and that hasn't finished gestating and that kind of thing. However, here's the flip side of it. With as with the morning pages, the button seat philosophy, well, there are a few things. So the first thing is that it puts you there in the place where your mind can kind of, if you're disciplined and if you build up the practice, it says, okay, this is work time. Now I can spill forth. Now I can open the floodgates of the ideas and the flow of productivity to come forth. That's the biggest thing that I found with the button seat. It also happens with the morning pages. Like I think that I have no ideas to put down, but as soon as I start doing it and I'm there like pen in hand, it just happens. So that's one reason to do the button seat thing. The other reason is the discipline of it, in that if you can get into a routine and you know that from like 10 a.m. to 12 noon, that's your writing time, or that's your music production time, or it's your video editing time, or whatever it is that you're doing, you kind of train your body into doing it, like taking the walk and doing your meditation practice or whatever it is. And it gives you a level of structure where you always get that thing knocked out for the day, and then it's done. And that in itself is amazingly freeing. It's freeing. Discipline can give you freedom, and I think that's just a really important thing to remember. Discipline gives you freedom. It doesn't take it away. So I'm starting to see the button seat thing more as a tool and a plus, more than it's a restriction. Obviously, if you sit there and you're 10 minutes in, 20 minutes in, and it's not happening, it's not clicking for whatever reason, I would get up and go do something else. In the same way that I treated my insomnia, like I was having problems sleeping because of the effects of the adrenal fatigue. With adrenal fatigue, you end up tired and wired all at the same time. So it's difficult to catch a wave of sleep and to actually get some good quality sleep. So what I used to do is if I went to bed and I wasn't feeling sleepy, I would get up again rather than like lie there and, look at my phone or, get my iPad and watch Netflix. And, like those are all super bad habits. And I found that by just getting up and even going and watching TV in the next room was super helpful for then when the wave of sleep started to come, I'd go and lie down and that would be it. And it helped. And I think it's the same thing with your creativity or your work productivity. Like if you're, I know like certainly if I'm too tired to really be focusing on something, I'm way better to go and have a nap than to sit and force myself through it. But similarly, if I'm feeling frenetic or that I have like a bunch of to do stuff, like admin or whatever kind of playing on my mind, then I will go and clear that off the decks. It's not procrastination if it's allowing you to get to the thing with a clear mind. So, just another example of how I was using the button seat thing recently. It felt a little bit like pulling teeth, but I knew that I was getting traction with each time I did it. So I had footage from my latest trip, my trip to Vegas, and it was several weeks old by the time I got my studio put together and I'd moved and, I was in a space where I could actually sit down and start working on it. And a ton of stuff had happened between that time. And I was a little bit kind of not out of body, but I was scattered. I was scattered because my stuff was scattered and I was still trying to get my head in the game. And so doing this process, but also then going and sitting, putting my butt in the seat and working on the footage, even if it was for, sometimes it was just for 20 minutes, but it was getting me back into the habit and the routine of sitting in front of the computer and focusing on the things that needed done. And, some sessions, all I'd do was download the footage off my Google Photos thing because I'd shot a bunch on my phone and put it into a folder and, named a Da Vinci file. That was it. I accomplished nothing more that day, but that was a huge help because also sometimes like these downloads, they take a while to tick through. And so you can go off and do other things and come back to them. But just having, the prep done or the project set up has been massively helpful in coming then to do the next bit and then the next bit. So I think it's important to recognize the progress that you are making, even though, like you've got this whole task to do and it's taken a week to edit one 20-minute video. I think embracing the process and being okay, accepting that sometimes it's slow going and sometimes you just have to keep showing up at the computer, for whatever time you can sit there and plug through what you can. And it gets easier. It always gets easier. And remembering that it always gets easier is super helpful. But also at the same time, remembering that there are going to be days when you sit down to write and it doesn't work and it's not happening. Even the process of putting garbage onto the page and practicing getting in flow is helping you on multiple levels to get used to tapping into that creative flow. I think the flow's always there. It's just sometimes we forget how to line up to it. And that's what we need to practice. So I think ultimately there's no one thing that works all of the time and no one thing that works for every individual. You have to try habits out and play with them and, see if they give you the results that you want, for you in your life with your goals. And if they don't, then stop doing them and find a habit that does. Find a collection of habits, throw them together and, form a little healthy routine for yourself. It's way easier to run a little routine, a sequence of stuff and to tweak it and to make it healthier and healthier. And it almost sets up the baseline for the rest of your day, even if you're not necessarily doing it first thing in the morning. It gives you a basis on which to build all the other stuff that takes a little bit more thinking about and, layering in of other habits. And what you'll find is that when you have a few of these habits, these tools in your toolkit that you can use regularly, they can be a really great fallback for when you have limited capacity, or when you don't know where to start, or when you travel, or when you go through a crazy transition, or when you're in a creative rut. Okay, so I intend that this was super helpful. Let me know in the comments what your favourite fallback habits are for getting your head back in the game, and maybe I'll give them a go too and report back. In the meantime, feel free to like and subscribe, and if you like this video, you may want to check this one out too.